Glad you're back. Hey, if you watched my video that I shot at Bennett Springs when it was so cold, this is part 2. This is where I take the pictures, or I bake the pictures in Lightroom. And I'll show you how I edit in Lightroom, the little tweaks that I do. Now, you remember my philosophy was that you're only halfway done after you take the pictures. And now we're going to bake the pictures in Lightroom. And then if we have time, I'm going to take you into Photoshop and show you how I punch up or give it a little more punch in Lightroom. Or I'm sorry, I said it wrong, in Photoshop. And they work hand in hand. If you like this type of video, please leave a comment. If you really like it, please subscribe or give me a thumbs up. That helps. I'm enjoying this video part. This is the first time I've used 2 cameras, so let me know what you think. So let's go into Lightroom. So here we are in Lightroom, and if you watch the video of me taking these pictures down in Bennett Springs, you remember I white balanced on some snow. Well, obviously it made the image way too warm, but because I was shooting raw, I can change the color quite a bit. JPEG, if you had taken this picture in a JPEG format, you couldn't tweak the color as much. But here's the before and here's the after. And we're going to try to get close to this. What I really liked about this picture was the head tilt of the eagle. So let's look at the other one we're going to edit, the fisherman. This is the before, and again the color's off, and the after. Let's go to our first image. Control, yeah, there we go. You can see on my histogram here, the shadows aren't touching. This is the shadow side, and the whites aren't touching. The most powerful tool in Photoshop is the crop tool. And I leave this grid on because I like using the rule of thirds. So I'm going to crop it kind of like that. So double click, and there's my crop. Let's see how close it is to, pretty close. I was just a little tighter. So let me zoom in or crop a little tighter. Now I'm using a Nikon D850, which is a high-res camera, so even if I cropped half of it, I would still have 25 meg images, so it gives me a lot of latitude. So there we go. Now, right over here on our color balance, it has auto color balance, daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, or custom. Now on a JPEG, you only have 3 of them, I believe. It's been so long since I shot a JPEG. Auto. Okay, you can see it helped quite a bit. Now the other thing I want to do is add a little more blue to the image. It's kind of cold that day. And let's see, no, I don't want to go green. The other thing you could do is take your eyedropper here, and right below the eagle's beak here, click there. I made it too magenta, so I'm going to take the magenta down a little bit. Okay, now let's go into exposure. I'm going to add a little exposure, make it just a little brighter. And now I'm going to do a trick that I use all the time. How much contrast do I need? I already told you we don't have full range of contrast. Right here, I hold down my Option key on a Mac, and I start with my white. And I move my white to the right until I see something pop up on the screen. You can see that little blue right there. And then I back off just a little bit, like that. Okay, so now my whites are almost touching. I'm going to do the same with the black. Option key, holding down the Option key, and I'll move to the left until I see some dark colors. You can see before, after. Okay, I've gone a little too blue, and that's probably one of the reasons why I like to do the before and after. And a little too much green. Okay, so let's see how close I am to the last one. Oh, pretty close color-wise. Now if I zoom in, and I'm going to zoom into 200%, and you can see there's a little, what I want to say, grain going on. Well, it's actually noise. If you look up here in my histogram, or below the histogram, you can see that I shot this auto ISO. It shot it at 3200. So the next thing I'm going to do is go down to my detail panel. Okay, and I'm going to go to 100%. No, I'm going to leave it at 200%. And what I do first is I turn the color all the way off, and I'm going to zoom in even closer to a dark area of the bird. Can you see these little magenta flecks in it? So the first thing I do is move my color slider to the right until there's no magenta showing, like that. And then I'm going to move my luminance over just a little bit. And I found from past that I'm going to take my blacks over just a little more than normal. And let's zoom back out to fit. And let's look at it before and after now. Before, after. Now I'm going to use radius tool. I'm going to draw a radius around my bird. It's already got a setting on it. All I got to do is double click the word effect over here. And I'm going to add darkness to the scene and leave the bird where it's at, very little. And that's probably about it. I'm going to desaturate it just a little bit too. I want to sharpen the bird just a little bit. So I'm going to use my brush tool. I'm going to go in 8. That's a little too much. I'm going to go in 300%. Okay. You can see it's not quite tack sharp. Double click the word effect here. I'm going to add sharpness, noise reduction, just barely, dehaze, clarity, and texture, and I'm just guessing on these. I'm gonna make a little larger brush. What I'm doing is sliding my finger on my mouse here, and I'm gonna use auto, and I gotta zoom in to show you this, auto masking. Okay, I've got it clicked on. So I'm gonna zoom back out. I'm gonna turn down my feather, just a little bit. Okay, now let's zoom back out. And now I'm going to brush on the bird. I don't know if you can see this on the screen recording, but it's sharpening the area that I'm brushing. Okay, now I can play with these some more. You're not stuck yet. You can turn up the, oh, that really helped. Turn up the texture a little more. Turn up the clarity just a hair more. And I'm going to lighten it, the bird, just a little bit. And then I'm going to add a little more contrast. Maybe turn down the highlights and open up the shadows just a little bit. So now fit. Oh yeah, that made a world of difference. So now if I look at my histogram, and let me zoom in, you can see that the whites aren't touching yet. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but you can change it right up here. I'm going to slide it over to there. Now I'm going to zoom back out. And let's do another before and after. Before, after. Before, after. Now I'm going to get in real close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another brush. Double click the word effect so I start fresh. I want to lighten that eye. And I want to add a little more saturation to that eye. Smaller brush. And I'm going to color right in here. Color. Okay, maybe over here. And now I'm going to turn it down just a little bit on the saturation. And on the high. There we go. The first edit I did. Here's the second edit. And I'm going to crop it just a little tighter. I'm hitting R as a shortcut key. I don't know why R is cropped. And let's see if I got it tight. Oh, what I did, let me show you. I didn't like this yellow right down here in the tree, so I'm going to crop some more. And again, because I'm shooting this high-res camera, I can get away with quite a bit of, or cropping I should say. Okay, now let's do the fisherman. Here's the after, here's the before. So most powerful tool is the crop tool. I'm gonna crop until I have no sky, and then I'm gonna move it over. I don't like the little rocks over here on this side. And you can see that I'm slightly tilted in my composition, so I'm gonna just turn it just a little bit. And I'm gonna go back to basic, and I'm going to go auto. Oh, that did a nice job. And again, you can see the histogram is not quite contrasty enough. So let me go down to my shadows, and I'm gonna go white first, slide to the right. There's some white showing already. Okay, now I'm gonna go to my blacks, and I'm having to take those over quite a bit. Now, let's see, looks like, it looks a little magenta to me, so I'm going to add a little green. I'm going to cool it off a little bit. Good. And now I'm going to go look at detail. Now this was shot at ISO 64, which there won't be any noise, so I don't have to do that. I'm going to look at my crop, take my feather all the way down so I can see it. I'm going to crop or darken it a little more. I want to just barely touch the fisherman and feather it. Darken it just a little more. Now I'm going to make the fisherman stand out a little more, so I'm going to draw a little. Oh, look, my last settings worked pretty good. Here's our before, after. Before, after. Now let me take you into Photoshop, and I'm going to let me go to the grid view, make the pictures a little larger. Okay, I'm going to take our two edits that we just did, highlight them, and I'm going to hit Command E on a Mac, and this is going to open Photoshop. And I'm going to show you this in a later video, but I made an action down here. Let me zoom in. Called landscapes. So I'm going to click landscape, and you can see I have now 3 layers. One's called darken, one's called lighten, and one's called saturation. Okay, I always start with the darken one. I want to darken in here, in here, in here. So I'm going to paint on my mask with a white brush, and I'm going to paint right here. Now don't panic and say, man, Mike is really ruining this photo. Okay, so I like that. Now I'm going to go to that mask, and I'm going to turn down the opacity about halfway. Now you can click the eyeball off and on to see what it does. And see how it draws your eyes? Now I like to soften my, I double clicked on the mask, and I'm going to feather that even more, that mask, and say okay. Now I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to change my brush to black, and I'm just going to paint around the bird. Okay? And now let's go to lighten. What would I like to lighten? Here's a trick. Let me make a smaller, whoop, I'm going bigger, smaller brush. I'm using the bracket key on the Mac. I think it's the same for a PC. And you can see so here we go. Click, see how I lightened? Click, click, click. What I'm doing is holding down the shift key, and it's giving me straight. I'm going to make the brush just a little smaller, and I'm going to do the same on this little limb right here. There we go. And maybe on the tail feathers. I'm not seeing anything. Well, let's just lighten up the head just a little bit. Whoop. Now it does look like I've ruined it. Okay, now let's soften the edge of that a little bit, not quite as much as we did the last one. And now we can turn that layer down, overdo, and then turn it down. So let's click on it. Just a little punch to those areas. Now let's use our saturation, and there isn't very much color just on the bird itself, so I'm going to make a bigger brush and saturate. And I don't like that it's saturated the branch right underneath the bird, so I'm going to change brushes, go to black, smaller brush, and erase that the limb got real yellow right there. And now I'm going to turn that down to about 50%. Before, after, and I think I can turn that one down just a little more too. That's the darker one, so I'm going to turn it down. Okay, now I'm going to flatten this image. I'm going to right click, flatten image, and I'm going to bring up Easy Panel 2. I downloaded this for free. Gosh, I can't think. Probably if you Googled Easy Panel 2, you'd probably get the place to download it. And I'm going to go Detail Enhance. So I'm going to click that. Okay, I'm back. And let me shut off what it did. Can you see how crunchy it got? It's overdone, I know that. So what I do is I turn it on, and I turn it all the way down to 20, at least 20. Okay, on, off, on, off. I'm not sure if you can see that. Let me zoom in on the eagle a little bit and do that again. Okay, on, off, on, off, on. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom back out. Okay, now what I do is I build a mask on that because I don't want the trees to be, I just want the eagle itself to be sharper. So what I'm going to do is hold down my Option key, go down here to, what's it called, Add a Layer Mask, and it gives me a black mask. Now you hit B for brush, and I switch to the white brush, and now I'm just going to paint where the eagle's at. This is so subtle, but it really makes a difference in the final picture. So now I've got everything the way I want it. I'm going to flatten the image again, and I'm going to hit Command S on my Mac, and that's saving it automatically back into Lightroom. Now if I can close that one, and here is our new image right here. How do I know? It says Edit To, because I edit it, and I save everything as a Photoshop document, PSD. Let me zoom in a little bit. This is my second edit. There was my first edit in Photoshop, and there is my digital negative, my original. Now let me zoom back out, and we're going to compare these two. Okay, so I'm going to go Compare C, and we're going to zoom in on the whoop, that's a little too close. Back off even more, and 100%. This is the one I edited in Photoshop, and this is the one I edited in Lightroom. It's just a hair sharper. Okay, so let's go back into Photoshop. Whoop. And we'll work on this one. This is the one we already edited in Lightroom. So let me go back down to my actions, hit my landscape, start with my dark, and I look and say, what do I want a little darker? So then I'm going to go to a white brush, B for brush. I'm going to make me a bigger brush, bracket key, and I'm going to paint right across here. And let's see, and this is where the artistic part comes out. I'm going to paint a little darker right there, in here, with a bigger brush. We'll paint in some right there. I don't want to get in that. I'm going to change my brush, and again, it looks like I'm ruining this photo. Gotta change my brush. When I say change my brush, I'm going from black to white. The shortcut key for that is X on a Mac. Okay, so I'm gonna turn that one on and off. Overdone. Okay, and before I change the mask, I'm gonna go ahead and do my my lighter. I like this line right here, so I'm going to lighten that up. I like this area right here, where all the snow's at. This tree right here, I'm gonna bring it out a little bit. This tree here. And again, I'm not being real critical on how I'm doing this. This bluff over here, I'm gonna highlight this side. Okay, I'm going to make a big brush. I'm gonna lighten this fog just a little bit. Okay, let me show you that full res, okay? And again, it looks like I've ruined it. So now let's do saturation. I'm gonna saturate this fisherman. I'm gonna saturate the bluff. Okay, so before, after. Now I'm gonna go back to my dark and I'm gonna turn it down a little more. And before and after. And you can see it's kind of harsh, so I'm going to double click on the mask and I'm going to feather that. I usually go at least 100%. You see how that softened the edge of the mask. And a lot of times I'll just take smoothing up to 100%. So let's turn off and on the dark. And see, if you didn't see this, now I don't like how dark it is up here, so I'm going to take it down a little bit more. There. Okay, now the light. Okay, let's take it down. I clicked it, double clicked it, so I'm gonna feather it first. Too far with the feather. Smooth. Okay. And now let's take down the opacity. And if it's overdone, you just take it down some more. Now I'm going to go into my saturation off, on, overkill. So now I'm going to go down to about 50. Actually, I went down to 43. And I'm going to soften the edge of that. And turn on the smooth. Okay. Now, the dark, the light, and the saturation. Now I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image. And now I'm going to go back to that free panel, Easy Panel 2, and use Detail Enhance again. Now again, this will take a while, so, and that did take probably 2 minutes. So here's the before, or I'm sorry, that was the after. This is the before, after, too crunchy. Before, after. So I'm going to turn it down to about 20. Opacity is what I'm turning down over here. I turn the opacity down to 20. Watch the fisherman if I take it all the way up again. See how crunchy how everything is? So I'm going to take this down to about 20. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hold down the Option key and click. I have a black mask. Now I'm going to zoom back out. And now I'm going to, because we can't see that mask because I put black over it, I'm going to go to brush and I'm just going to paint in some of the areas I want the viewer to look at. And I usually paint foreground objects, things like that. Okay, now I'm going to, you see that little hole in my mask there? Let me zoom in. Right there. Well, how do I fix that? I think it's Option click, yeah, and then I can just paint in right there. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back on, and I'm happy with that. Let me double click on the mask here, feather that, and smooth it. Okay. Now I just flatten the image and hit Command S on my Mac, and as soon as it's done, Command W, that closes it, and then I'll quit Photoshop. And there we go. There's our final image, And if you look down here, it's my second edit in Photoshop, and it's a Photoshop document. And then here is my original. Can you see the difference? There's the original edit in Lightroom, and there's the Photoshop edit. Look how much better, to me, it looks. So, I hope you learned something today. Again, if you like this video, please subscribe, or at least give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.